Margaret Whitfield's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade fresh off the stone. "I'm going to tell everyone in this city that you're a cook who crawled into a rich man's bed for his money." "That's not true," Claire whispered. "I don't care if it's true." Margaret's smile was cold, practiced. That's what people are going to believe. But what she didn't know was that the two of them had a past. And this time, he wasn't going to let her walk away again. Claire was 9 years old the first time she understood that a kitchen could be a sanctuary. Her father, James Bennett, ran a small diner outside Hartford. Nothing fancy, but he had a gift. He could make a grilled cheese sandwich taste like a hug. "Food's not about your hands, kiddo," he used to say, lifting her onto a step stool so she could reach the stove. "It's about memory. If a dish doesn't remind somebody of something, it's not worth serving." Sundays were theirs. Diner closed early, and they'd invent recipes nobody would ever order. He'd blindfold her with a dish towel and make her guess ingredients by smell. When she got it right, he'd spin her around the kitchen like they'd won the lottery. "You've got the nose for it, Claire Bear," he told her once, setting her back down, still laughing. "Better than half the cooks I've worked with. Don't ever let anybody tell you different." "Someday," he told her, "you're going to have your own place. Bigger and better than this one. I promise you that." "Bigger than this?" She'd looked around the cramped little kitchen, wide-eyed, like he'd just promised her the moon. "Bigger than this," he said, "with your name over the door. You watch." At school, there was a quiet boy who never smiled. Alexander Whitfield. New money family. His dad had just made it big in real estate. But Alexander still ate lunch alone, hugging his backpack like a shield. "Why do you always sit by yourself?" Claire asked him one day, plopping down next to him without an invitation. He shrugged. "Kids think I'm weird." "I'm weird too," Claire said, grinning. "My dad says weird people are the interesting ones." "What's weird about you?" "I can tell what's in a soup just by smelling it, with my eyes closed." She said it like it was a superpower, because to her it was. Alexander actually smiled at that. A small one, but real. "That's not weird. That's cool." "See? Weird and cool aren't that different." And with time, they became friends. At recess, while everyone else played tag, they'd sit under the big oak tree by the fence and sing a song Claire's father used to hum, something about a sailor waiting for someone across the sea. They never got the words quite right. They didn't care. "You're the only one who talks to me here," Alexander admitted once, picking at the grass. "Well, somebody's got her," Claire said. "Might as well be me." Then one day Alexander stopped showing up. His family moved to Greenwich. New house, new school, new life. The kind of life, his father said, where you didn't need friends from that side of town. Claire waited for him under the oak tree for a week before she stopped expecting him to show. Claire never saw him again, and it wasn't long before her own world came apart too. James Bennett got sick when Claire was 13. Dizziness first. He blamed it on long shifts, too much coffee, not enough sleep. Then a diagnosis that took the family's whole world and folded it in half. Treatment. More treatment. The diner sold. Then the house. Then everything else. The furniture, the old station wagon, even the beat-up pots and pans that had been in the family for 2 generations. Claire remembers hospital waiting rooms, the smell of hand sanitizer, her mother crying quietly in the kitchen, thinking Claire was asleep. She remembers sitting in those stiff plastic chairs doing homework she couldn't concentrate on, listening to machines beep down the hall, wondering if this was just what life was now. Some nights, even sick, her father would ask her to describe her day, down to what she'd cooked in home ec class, just to watch her light up for a minute. Near the end, her father asked her to bring him a bowl of soup, not because he was hungry, because he wanted to teach her something one last time. "When I'm gone," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "you keep cooking. Every time you do, I'll be right there with you. In the smell, the taste, every decision you make standing in front of that stove." "Don't say that, Dad. It's true, kiddo. And I need you to know it so you're never afraid." She held his hand until he fell asleep that night. It was the last real conversation they had. James Bennett died in October. Claire was 14. The years after weren't easy. Public school, dishwashing jobs at 16, then line cook, then something closer to a real position, though the paychecks never seemed to stretch as far as they should. Culinary school on a partial scholarship, and a loan she was still paying off a decade later. More than once she thought about quitting. She remembers one night in particular, 12 hours on her feet aching, sitting on the curb outside the restaurant where she worked, crying from sheer exhaustion, wondering if any of it was actually going to pay off. Her mother, working 2 jobs of her own just to keep them afloat, never once suggested she stop. Your father believed in this, she told Claire once, exhausted herself, folding laundry at midnight. That's got to count for something. It was the memory of her father, that quiet promise that got her back on her feet the next morning. She built a name for herself, worked good kitchens, won a couple of small competitions, got written up in a local paper once. But the dream that mattered, her own restaurant, her father's name on the door, always stayed just out of reach. Every time she managed to save something real, life found a way to take it back. Rent, her mother's medical bills, a car repair she couldn't put off. Then, at 29, an opportunity landed in her lap that felt too perfect to be real. A wealthy Greenwich family, the Whitfields, needed a live-in chef, room and board included. The salary alone would cover exactly what she needed to finish out the restaurant she'd been slowly renovating for 2 years. She took the job. She had no idea it would lead her straight back into Alexander Whitfield's life. The interview was brief, cold. Margaret Whitfield studied Claire's resume without looking up. I have 2 other candidates, both more experienced with households like this one. I understand, Claire said, spine straight, but neither of them is going to cook with more heart than I will. Something in that answer made Margaret glance up. She studied Claire for a long moment, the way someone studies a stranger they're deciding whether to trust. You'll live here, you'll follow the rules, and I expect flawless results, not good intentions. I won't disappoint you. We'll see. Margaret closed the folder. I'll be in touch. 2 days later, she got the call. The Whitfield estate looked like something out of a magazine. Wrought iron gates, manicured lawns that seemed to stretch forever, marble floors, chandeliers, staff so well trained they seemed to disappear the moment they weren't needed. Breakfast is at 7 sharp. Dinner at 9, Margaret said, walking her through the halls, heels clicking against the stone. And staff doesn't socialize with family, are we clear? Crystal clear. One more thing. Margaret stopped in front of a set of double doors. This house runs a certain way. I'd hate for you to learn that the hard way. The only warm face was Dorothy, the housekeeper, 60-something, kind eyes, 20 years with the family. Don't let Margaret get to you, Dorothy whispered, showing Claire to her room. Bark's worse than the bite. Just keep your head down and cook well, and you'll do just fine here. Is she always like that? Dorothy chuckled. Honey, you don't know the half of it, just wait. That night, prepping dinner, Claire heard footsteps behind her. Didn't know we hired someone new. She turned. Tall man, loosened tie, tired eyes after a long day. Alexander Whitfield. Neither of them recognized the other. 20 years does that. I'm Claire, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. New chef, Alexander. He reached for a slice of fruit off her cutting board without thinking. Their hands brushed. Neither said anything about it, but both felt it. Smells good in here, he said, nodding at the pot on the stove. Nobody's cooked like that in this house in years. Family recipe, Claire said. You'll have to let me try it sometime if that's allowed. I think that can be arranged. Welcome to the house, he said, and left a little too quickly. Claire stood there wondering why her heart was racing. The weeks that followed fell into a strange rhythm. Alexander started showing up in the kitchen more than any homeowner should, a glass of water at midnight, tasting something before it's served. Sometimes no excuse at all. You're here a lot for someone who has an entire staff to bring him water, Claire told him once, not looking up from the cutting board. Guess I like the company down here better. He grabbed a stool and sat like he belonged there. Sue me. One night, helping her whip a batch of frosting, they ended up covered in flour, laughing like teenagers, until Dorothy walked in, cleared her throat, and the two of them jumped apart. Margaret's down the hall, she warned under her breath. Neither of them said what they were feeling, but it was there, growing, quietly, one midnight glass of water at a time. One evening, Alexander found her sitting on the back steps, after closing down the kitchen, staring out at the dark yard. Long day? He asked, sitting down next to her without waiting for an invitation this time. Long life, some days. She smiled to take the edge off it. My dad used to say the kitchen was the only place where the whole world made sense. I used to believe that unconditionally. Lately it's more like 80%. What happened to the other 20? She glanced at him sideways. You really want to know? I asked, didn't I? She didn't answer that directly. Instead, she told him a little about her father, the diner, the Sundays, the promise she'd made herself to open a place with his name on the door. Alexander listened like it was the most important thing anyone had told him in years. He sounds like he was a good man, Alexander said quietly. He was the best man I ever knew. She looked at him. Present company still being evaluated. He laughed, surprised, and for a second the weight he usually carried seemed to lift off his shoulders entirely. Then, one afternoon, Margaret walked into the kitchen with an announcement. "I need something special for Saturday. We're announcing my son's engagement." Something in Claire's chest went hollow. She didn't have a word for it yet. "Of course," she said, voice steadier than she felt. That afternoon she met Evelyn Marsh, Alexander's fiancée. Old money family, easy elegance, kind enough on the surface. "Everything has to be perfect," Evelyn said, going over the menu with a checklist. "This wedding matters to both families. My father and Mr. Whitfield have a deal riding on it. Not us, both families." "How long have you two known each other?" Claire asked, mostly to fill the silence. "Since we were kids, technically. Our parents have been friends forever." Evelyn said it lightly, like it was a fun fact and not the entire foundation of her marriage. It just made sense. "And that's enough? Making sense?" Evelyn looked up from her checklist, surprised by the question. "It's more than most people get," she said, and went back to the menu. Claire couldn't help wondering if Evelyn had ever actually been in love with Alexander, or if she'd simply accepted, like everyone around her, that love was a luxury her social class didn't always afford. The night of the engagement party, the estate lit up like a stage set, live band, waitstaff in white gloves, money dressed up as elegance. Claire worked the kitchen all night, barely catching a glimpse of Alexander across the room. Sharp suit, plastered smile that never reached his eyes. Near midnight, exhausted, she stepped out to the back garden for air. Alexander was already there, tie undone, staring at the party lights like he was watching someone else's life happen. "Are you okay?" Claire asked. "Yeah," his voice said otherwise. "Just needed a minute. Big night for you." "Yeah," he let out a breath, something like that. "You don't sound thrilled for a guy who just got engaged." He glanced at her, surprised by the directness. "That obvious?" "A little." "Your food's a hit tonight," he said after a pause, clearly changing the subject. "People won't stop talking about it. Doubt they came for the food." He laughed, the first real laugh she'd heard from him all night. "Honestly, maybe not, but it's the best thing about this party so far." "That's a low bar." "You'd be surprised how low." Their eyes met. Neither looked away. He stepped closer. She didn't step back. The air between them went heavy, slow, like the world was giving them one stolen second. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Alexander!" Evelyn's voice from the doorway. They jumped apart like they'd been caught doing something wrong. "There you are," Evelyn said, walking up, her eyes flicking briefly, curiously between the two of them. "They're looking for you inside. My dad wants to do the toast." "Coming," Alexander said, voice tight. He glanced back at Claire once before he left. She looked away. "This isn't right," she whispered to herself, and went back inside, hands trembling as she picked up a tray she didn't remember setting down. A few days later, humming without thinking while she worked, Claire caught herself singing a melody she hadn't sung in years, something about a sailor, someone waiting. Alexander, passing by, froze mid-step. He walked into the kitchen, slower than usual, like he wasn't sure his legs had agreed to bring him there. "Where do you know that song from?" "My dad taught it to me," Claire said, surprised, setting down her knife. "It's special. I learned it from someone important when I was a kid. A friend I never saw again." "Do you remember his name?" Claire tilted her head, studying him. "That's a strange question. Humor me." "Alexander," she said slowly. "Actually, a boy named Alexander. Why?" Something shifted behind his eyes. A memory, a tree, a little girl with braids, off-key, laughing every time she messed up the words. "It can't be," he thought. "It's her." He opened his mouth, closed it again. "No reason," he managed. "Just, nice song." He said nothing else. Not yet. Days passed before he found the nerve. Claire brought coffee to his office like she did every afternoon. "Here you go," she said, setting the cup down. "Claire." She stopped. He stood and without warning started humming the same song. "What are you—" "I can't believe it's you." His voice cracked. "All these years, and I never stopped thinking about that song. About the girl who sang it with me under a tree at recess, off-key every single time." "Alexander, I don't understand what—" "You told me his name," he said. "Yours. It was you the whole time. I didn't let myself believe it." He stepped closer, cupping her face in his hand. "It was you. It was always you." A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She remembered him, really remembered him. The quiet boy under the oak tree, the one who used to hug his backpack like a shield. "I looked for you," she whispered, "after you stopped coming to school. I waited by that tree for a week. I'm sorry I didn't have a choice back then. He leaned in. She let herself close her eyes for 1 second, then stepped back. This isn't right, she said, shaking. Claire, no. She shook her head. You're engaged, Alexander. This can't happen. I don't love her, he said, and the certainty in his own voice seemed to surprise him. I never loved her. I love you. I never stopped. Life took you away from me, but it just gave you back. I'm not losing you again. I can't, Claire whispered, tears streaming. I can't. She ran out of the office, leaving him standing there with everything he'd just confessed hanging in the air. Neither of them knew Margaret had heard every word from the hallway. She slipped behind a column just before Claire ran past, never noticing her. Her face wasn't shocked. It was decided. From that day on, Margaret watched Claire differently. Every glance. Every time Alexander wandered into the kitchen with no real excuse, she started quietly pulling the staff aside. Have you noticed anything strange between my son and the new chef? She asked the driver one afternoon. No, ma'am. Nothing I've seen. She asked the same question in different words to 2 more members of the staff that week. Nobody gave her anything. But Margaret didn't need much. A pause, a half-second too long. A glance somebody tried too hard to make look casual. She'd built an empire out of noticing what people didn't want her to see. But Dorothy, 20 years with this family, and she knew Margaret better than anyone, understood exactly what was happening. Be careful, she warned Claire that night. She's asking questions, and when she starts asking questions, she always finds the answers. What do I do? Keep your head down, do your job, and pray she's wrong. Dorothy didn't sound convinced that would be enough. A couple of days later, Margaret announced it was time to lock down the wedding menu. I want to taste the options myself, she said, not quite looking at Claire. Alexander and Evelyn will be there. Show me what you can do. Claire spent the whole afternoon on 3 different dishes, each one more careful than the last, her hands steadier than her nerves. When the time came, she carried the first plate into the dining room herself. Alexander and Evelyn sat side by side. Margaret at the head of the table, arms crossed, watching. Claire set the plate down, hands steady, even though her heart wasn't. Evelyn tasted it first. This is incredible, she said, surprised. You really do have a gift. Agreed, Alexander added, a smile that tried too hard to look casual. Best thing I've had in this house in years. Margaret took a small bite, chewed slowly, and set her fork down with a deliberate little clink. It's bland, she said, voice even. No character to it at all. Any cook with real experience would know how to balance flavors better. Evelyn frowned, confused. She looked at her own plate, then at Margaret's, searching for whatever difference her future mother-in-law claimed to have found. I thought it was pretty great, honestly, she said, unsure, then caved. But now that you mention it, maybe it could use a little more seasoning. Mother, it's genuinely good, Alexander cut in. I don't understand what... Sweetheart, Margaret's voice went soft, a smile that never reached her eyes. You're very polite, but this isn't about being nice to the cook. This is about making sure everything's perfect for your wedding. She turned to Claire without losing her composure. Bring me another plate, and pay closer attention this time. Claire nodded. Before picking up the dish, she glanced up and caught Alexander's eyes for just a second. Barely anything, but enough. Then she looked down and walked out of the room in silence, the dining room door swinging shut behind her. The moment she was gone, the table went quiet. Evelyn kept watching a beat too long, eyes still on the door Claire had disappeared through. Something about the way Alexander had jumped to defend the cook, how fast, how sharp, didn't quite add up to a simple opinion about food. You really didn't think that was bland? Evelyn asked him, careful, testing. No, I really didn't. Huh. She said nothing else. But for the first time, she started wondering if there was something else going on in that house. It didn't take Margaret long to confirm what she already suspected. One afternoon, with Alexander at a meeting that would run late, she summoned Claire to the library. Claire walked in with a knot in her stomach. Margaret stood by the window. I know what happened in his office. Mrs. Whitfield, I don't care about your explanations. Margaret's voice was ice. This family has spent generations building a name. I will not let a cook, however talented, drag it through the mud. I never wanted any of this, Claire said, holding her ground despite the fear. I didn't even know who Alexander was when I took this job. I don't care what you wanted. I care what happens if you don't stay away from my son. A pause. Long. Calculated. I will make sure that restaurant of yours never opens. I'll call every bank, every investor, every supplier in this city, and I will tell them exactly who you are. Claire's legs went weak. You'd really do that? Ruin someone's entire life's work over a conversation you overheard? I'd do far more than that, if it came to it. Margaret said it plainly, like she was reading off a grocery list. You have no idea what I'm capable of protecting this family. Why does it matter so much to you? She managed to ask. He's not happy in that engagement. You know that. My son's happiness, Margaret said, unmoved, doesn't outweigh the name he carries. That's something someone raised the way you were will never understand. Maybe I don't. But I understand that a name doesn't mean much if the person carrying it is miserable. Something flickered across Margaret's face. Not doubt, exactly. Irritation that Claire had a point. Careful, Margaret said quietly. I'd hate to think you were more trouble than you're worth. Claire looked down. You're right, she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. I'll stay away. She walked out of that library with her heart in pieces. That night, Claire told Alexander everything in the small service yard where no one could overhear. She expected him to fight, to confront his mother, to do something, anything, that proved he'd protect her. Instead, he went quiet, running a hand through his hair. Give me some time, he said finally. I'll talk to her. I'll fix this, I promise. I need to do this the right way. If I go in swinging, she could make it worse. She has contacts everywhere in this city. The right way? Claire's voice cracked with disbelief. Alexander, your mother is about to destroy everything I've built. There's no right way to wait through that. I know. He took her hands. That's exactly why I don't want to act without thinking. You keep saying that. The right way. Not yet. Give me time. When is it ever going to be the right time to just say it out loud to her face? Claire, he even offered her money, extra, to finish the restaurant faster, as if cash could fix what she actually needed, him standing beside her, in the open, unafraid. I don't want your money, Alexander. Her voice broke. I want you to stop asking me to wait. I've spent my whole life waiting for things to get better, for the money to be enough, for someone to see me as more than a problem to handle quietly. That's not what this is, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like you'd rather manage me than choose me. I can't keep risking everything I've built for someone who won't even say it out loud, in front of his own family. He tried to answer. She was already walking away. That night, without telling anyone, Claire wrote her resignation letter. It took her 3 tries to get the wording right. She kept writing things that sounded too much like an explanation and crossing them out. In the end, she kept it short, formal, nothing that would give away the real reason. She left it on Dorothy's desk before sunrise, packed 1 suitcase, and was gone before the house woke up. No goodbyes. No chance for anyone to talk her out of it. Dorothy found the letter and felt her heart sink. She said nothing. It wasn't her place. That evening at dinner, Alexander heard the doorbell. Through the dining room window, he watched a delivery driver hand Dorothy several bags of takeout, something that never happened in this house. He frowned. Where's Claire? Why are we ordering food? Margaret didn't look up from her plate. That irresponsible girl handed in her resignation this morning. Better this way, honestly. She never really fit in here. A pause, then a small, satisfied smile. Don't worry, sweetheart, we'll find someone new before the wedding. Alexander felt the floor drop out from under him. He'd lost her. Again. He left the table without finishing dinner, went up to his room and called her a dozen times that night. She never picked up. He sat on the edge of his bed until nearly 2 in the morning, phone in hand, replaying every version of the conversation he should have had with his mother weeks ago. What Margaret didn't know was that Claire already had a plan. She thought her savings from the Whitfield house would finally be enough. Running the numbers again, she realized she was still short. The commercial kitchen equipment alone would eat the difference. The first bank turned her down flat. The loan officer barely looked up from his screen. Your credit history's too thin, he said. I'm sorry, come back in a couple years, once you've got more of a track record. I don't have a couple years. I understand that, but that's the risk profile you're working with. A private lender offered terms so brutal, they'd have cost her the restaurant before it even opened. Sky-high interest. A repayment schedule that would have had her underwater within 6 months. Nearly ready to give up, she remembered something her father used to say. In this business, the people you know matter more than the money you have. She called Frank Russo, an old family friend who ran a small food supply company and had known her since she was a kid. Claire Bennett, he said, picking up on the second ring, warmth in his voice immediately. It's been years. What's going on? She told him everything. The restaurant, the numbers, how close she was, how short she'd come up. Your dad helped me out once back when I was just starting, Frank said. Gave me my first real supply contract when nobody else would touch a new guy. Time to return the favor. Frank, I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. Let me help you finish this thing. With his help, she closed the gap on fair terms and finally had what she needed to finish the build-out. Every detail of that restaurant was chosen with her father in mind. A black and white photo of James Bennett, grinning behind his old diner counter, went up by the front door, and over the entrance in simple letters, Bennett's. The opening was just days away when the contractor called to say the new oven wouldn't arrive in time. Some issue with the supplier, nothing he could do about it. Claire sat on the floor of her half-finished kitchen that night, staring at the empty space where the oven should have been, and let herself cry for exactly 5 minutes. Then she got up, called around to 3 restaurants that had closed in the past year, and found a used commercial oven for half the price, in decent enough shape, delivered 2 days later. It wasn't the oven she'd planned on. It worked just fine. Claire worked sunrise to midnight, mostly alone, trying not to think about Alexander, the estate, everything she'd left behind. Miles away, Alexander was fighting his own battle. The days after Claire's resignation were the hardest Alexander could remember. He went to the office, sat through meetings, signed contracts, but his mind kept drifting to a small kitchen, a woman with quick, sure hands, a song he'd sung as a kid without knowing it would break his heart twice. Marcus, a close friend from business school who still had his trust, noticed right away. "You've been useless all week," Marcus said, dropping into the chair across from his desk. "Oh, what's going on?" "Nothing, just tired." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Alex, it's me." Alexander told him everything. The childhood, the reunion, his mother's threat, the resignation, the silence since. Marcus listened without interrupting, arms crossed, taking it all in. "So let me get this straight," he said once Alexander finished. "You found the girl you never got over. Your mother threatened to ruin her life over it. She quit and disappeared, and you're sitting here signing contracts like nothing happened. When you put it that way, there's no other way to put it, man. I've known you 10 years. I've never once heard you talk about anyone the way you just talked about her. You need to make a decision," he said finally. "You can't keep living the life your mother planned while hiding the one you actually want. That's not fair to anyone. Not to you, not to Evelyn, not to her. It's not that simple. If I do this, I lose everything. The company, my mother, maybe even my name on the door of this building. And if you don't do this," Marcus said quietly, "what do you actually keep? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you'd have the name, the company, the whole empire, and none of it would mean anything to you." Alexander didn't have an answer for that. That night alone in his office, something became clear to Alexander. The first time he lost Claire, he was a kid. He didn't have a choice. This time he was a grown man with every choice in the world, and he was about to let her go again out of fear. Fear of disappointing his mother, fear of breaking the mold, fear of stopping being the perfect son. That night, he decided. First, he went to find Evelyn. She was on the terrace at her parents' house, scrolling her phone. She looked up and gave him the same polite, automatic smile she always did. "Alexander, I was just going over the invitation list. We still need to settle on the flowers, by the way. My mother wants peonies. I'm leaning towards something less predictable." "Evelyn," his voice was serious, "we need to talk." Something in his tone made her set the phone down. "That sounds ominous." "I'm sorry," he started. "I never wanted to hurt you, and I need you to know this has nothing to do with who you are. You're an incredible woman, smart, kind, way more patient with me than I probably deserve." She watched him steadily, like she already knew what was coming. "But I don't love you," he continued, "and I can't marry you knowing that eventually it would make you just as unhappy as it would make me. It's not fair to either of us to spend our lives honoring a deal our families made for us." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the garden. Then, to his surprise, she laughed, soft, almost relieved. "I've been trying to figure out how to say the same thing for weeks," she admitted. "Our families moved so fast, neither of us ever stopped to ask if we actually wanted this. I felt the distance too, Alexander. I just never said it out loud. Guess I was waiting for someone else to say it first." "Is it the cook?" she asked, not unkindly. "I noticed something back at the tasting, the way you jumped in to defend her." He didn't answer right away, which was answer enough. "I thought so," Evelyn said, almost smiling. "For what it's worth, I hope it works out for you two." "Are you going to be okay?" he asked. "I'm going to be better than okay." Her smile was the most genuine he'd ever seen from her. "Now I get to look for something real, instead of something convenient." "I hope you find it," he said. You too. It was a strange goodbye. No bitterness. Almost freeing for both of them. Opening night at Bennett's arrived under a clear sky. Claire checked every table twice. The lighting, the menu, her father's photo by the door, angled just right so it caught the light from the front window. Guests trickled in. Friends, old co-workers, curious locals who'd heard good things about the new chef in town. Frank Russo showed up early with a bouquet and a proud grin. "Well, your dad would have loved this," he said, hugging her. "He'd have been insufferable about it, honestly, bragging to everyone at the diner." "I can hear him now," Claire laughed, wiping her eyes before they could actually spill over. The night rolled on. Laughter, good food, compliments. A local food critic, unannounced, finished his plate and scribbled something in a notebook, smiling to himself in a way that made Claire's stomach flip with nerves. One older woman stopped her on the way back to the kitchen. "Honey, I haven't had a dish that good since my own mother was alive. You've got a gift. Thank you," Claire said, and meant it more than the woman probably knew. A young couple at table 6 asked if this was a family recipe, and when Claire told them about her father, the woman actually teared up a little, apologizing, blaming the wine. It should have been the happiest night of her life, and it was, mostly. But somewhere in her chest, there was a hole no compliment could fill. She'd built her dream, alone, without him. When the last guest left, Claire dimmed the lights, leaving just one lamp burning by the door. She sat at an empty table, still in her apron, looking around at everything she'd built. The tables, the menus, her father's photo watching over all of it. She picked up her phone, started typing a message to Alexander, deleted it before hitting send. "That's enough for tonight," she told herself, tucking the phone away, letting herself breathe for the first time in weeks. Across town, in the Whitfield Library, Alexander was having the hardest conversation of his life. "I'm not marrying Evelyn," he told his mother, standing where Margaret had once threatened Claire. Margaret's face twisted between disbelief and fury. "For that cook?" she spat. "You're going to throw away everything this family built for a woman with no name, no money, nothing to offer you? She has something no fortune can buy, Mother. My heart. Since I was a kid, long before you decided that neighborhood, that school, those people weren't good enough for me. Everything I did," Margaret shot back, voice rising for the first time, "I did to give you a better life. I know, and I'm grateful. But a better life doesn't mean a life without love. It means the opposite. You think you love her, you barely know her, you knew a little girl 20 years ago, that's not the same thing." "Maybe not. But I've spent the last few months getting to know the woman she became, and everything I felt then, I feel now. Stronger, actually." "If you do this," Margaret said, voice turning to ice, "I will cut you off. I will not let a cook become my daughter-in-law. You'll lose the company, the name, everything that's rightfully yours." Alexander took a breath. "I'm sorry you feel that way, and I understand your decision even if I don't agree with it. I'll always love you, Mum, but this time I'm choosing what I actually want, and what I want is to be happy with the person I've always loved." Margaret said nothing else. She just turned back toward the window, her silence its own kind of answer. He walked out that night with one suitcase and a certainty he hadn't felt in years, that he was finally doing the right thing. He drove slow through town, no rush, enjoying the quiet for the first time in weeks. On the way, without meaning to, he passed what was left of Claire's old neighborhood. The school was still standing. Same yard, same oak tree, bigger now. Branches spread wide over the fence like it had been waiting. He stopped the car just to look at it, smiled, almost without noticing, and kept driving. By the time Alexander reached Bennett's, the party was winding down. The last guests were saying their goodbyes, thanking Claire with hugs. She saw him walk in from across the room. She froze, a plate still in her hands. He crossed the room slowly, weaving between the emptying tables, ignoring the curious glances from the last few guests still lingering by the door. "I called off the engagement," he said. No preamble. "I talked to my mother. I know I might lose everything. Her approval, the inheritance, the name she cares so much about." He stopped in front of her. "But I can't lose you again, not after finding you twice in one lifetime." Claire felt the tears return, different this time. "Are you sure?" she asked, voice shaking. "This isn't going to be easy. You're starting over, in a lot of ways. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, and starting over doesn't scare me as long as it's with you. You're really willing to give all that up? The company, the house, all of it?" "I already did." "Standing in that library a couple hours ago," he took her hand. "None of it ever felt like mine, Claire. Not the way this does. Not the way you do. I spent 30 years being the son my family needed. I'd like to spend the rest of it being the man I actually am. This time, when he leaned in to kiss her, she didn't pull away. She let herself go completely, right there, in the middle of the restaurant that carried her father's name, surrounded by everything she'd built with her own 2 hands, with the man she'd never stopped loving, no matter how hard life tried to keep them apart. The months that followed changed everything for both of them. Alexander stepped down from his role at the family company and started helping Claire run the business side of the restaurant, bringing his experience to the numbers, never touching what was hers. The kitchen. Money was tight at first. They lived in a small apartment, worlds away from the estate he'd grown up in. He learned to live without a driver, without a housekeeper, without half the things he used to take for granted. He didn't miss any of it. But for the first time in years, his life actually felt like his own. Bennett's grew faster than either of them expected. Reviews came in from other cities, then other states, food bloggers, then actual critics, then a write-up in a national magazine that Claire read 4 times before she believed it was real. Chefs started making the trip just to try the food Claire made with the same love she'd learned from her father, standing on a step stool at 9 years old. Even Margaret, though she'd never say it out loud, softened with time. The first time she showed up at Bennett's unannounced, no warning. It was the closest she ever came to an apology. Claire served her the best dish in the house. No resentment, no need for words. Margaret ate in silence, and for just a moment something in her face let go. She never apologized. But she came back the following month, and the one after that. Dorothy retired from the estate a year later and took a part-time job at Bennett's, mostly so she could keep an eye on both of them, she said, though everyone suspected she just liked being around people who actually thanked her for her work. Frank Russo became a regular too, showing up every Friday with some new supplier he wanted Claire to try, still calling her kiddo, even though she ran her own kitchen now. Even Evelyn stopped by once, almost a year after the engagement party, with a boyfriend Claire had never met, and a smile that looked nothing like the polite, practiced one from the tasting table. She waved from across the room. Claire waved back. One evening, with the restaurant full of noise and laughter, Claire paused in front of her father's photo by the door. "We did it, Dad," she whispered, smiling. "We finally did it." Alexander wrapped his arms around her from behind, and together they stood there looking at that photograph, knowing that somehow James Bennett was still there, in every dish, every smile, every love story that started, all those years ago, with a song under an oak tree. Now tell me, on a scale from 1 to 10, what would you rate this story? Let me know in the comments.